Hey, on today's episode of Live Lean TV, I'm explaining metabolic types, including what is it, how to test it, and a weight loss diet plan based on your metabolic type. And to save you time, I've included timestamps to all the questions and answers on the screen and in the video description below. So with that said, let's jump right into it. Metabolic type versus metabolic body type. So when talking about metabolic type, it's often confused with metabolic body types. So here's the difference. Metabolic typing categorizes people based on how their bodies process nutrients. Now, metabolic body types categorizes people's natural physical tendencies, including the three somatotypes. So as you can see on the screen, I'll share what each somatotype, ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph mean. So for this video, we are focusing on metabolic typing based on how your bodies process nutrients. And to further confuse things, depending on which online metabolic typing test you take, you can receive different metabolic typing classifications. So while some systems focus on the speed of metabolisms, others focus on macronutrient preferences. And towards the end of the video, I'll summarize what each metabolic type classification means to you. So what is the metabolic type diet? The most popular classification of metabolic types is called the metabolic type diet, also known as the metabolic typing diet. So this was popularized by a book written by Trish Fahey and William Walcott called the metabolic typing diet. So the metabolic type diet tailors nutrition to your body's metabolic type. So you have carbohydrate type, protein type, and a mixed type. So it's based on the idea that different people process each macronutrient differently, therefore affecting energy levels, hunger, and weight. So the goal is to match your diet to your body's unique needs to optimize energy and metabolism. However, while this is popular, the scientific support is limited. Weight loss ultimately depends on a calorie deficit and sustainable habits. So what are the three different metabolic types for weight loss? So metabolic types for weight loss categorize how your body processes food based on genetics, hormones, and lifestyle. So the three main metabolic types are carbohydrate type, which is best fueled by higher carb, lower fat diets with lean proteins. The recommended macros typically are protein at 20 to 30%, carbohydrates at 60 to 70%, and fat at 10 to 20%. Then you have the protein type. These thrive on higher protein and fat with fewer carbs. The recommended macros typically is protein at 40 to 50%, carbohydrates at 10 to 20%, and fat at 30 to 40%. And lastly, you have the mixed type. So this requires a balanced intake of carbs, proteins, and fats with a recommended macros of protein 30 to 40%, carbohydrates 30 to 40%, and fat at 30 to 40%. So the theory is identifying your metabolic type can optimize energy, hunger control, and fat loss by personalizing your macronutrient ratios. However, once again, science shows no one-size-fits-all for weight loss. Weight loss depends on creating sustainable calorie deficit and healthy eating habits. So how do you know your metabolic type? So if you're wondering how do I check my metabolic type, consider these methods. Take a self-assessment. So reflect on how different foods affect your energy, mood, and hunger. Protein types often feel energized with fats and proteins, while carb types thrive on grains and fruits, and mixed types just prefer a balance. You could take an online metabolic type test or quiz. We'll ask you your preferences, energy, and digestion, which can then provide guidance on your metabolic type. Or professional testing. So nutritional counselors may analyze your genetics, blood work, or your metabolism. Or trial and error. Experiment with different macronutrient ratios of carbs, proteins, and fats, and then track your results. As I've said, guys, metabolic typing isn't a precise science. Focus on what feels sustainable, healthy, and effective for your weight loss goals. So metabolic types and diet meal plan. Wondering what to eat based on your unique metabolic type? Here's an example of a diet plan based on how to eat according to the three most common metabolic types. Each type reflects how the body best processes macronutrients of protein, carbohydrates, and fats. Number one is the protein type diet, which is higher in protein and fat and lower in carbs. So on the screen, you'll see a standard meal plan for a protein type with breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. So the focus is protein and fat to fuel energy with minimal carbs. This type tends to have a low tolerance for carbs and feels energized with higher protein and fats. Okay, so for the carbohydrate type diet, which is higher in carbs, moderate in protein, and lower fat. I'll share a daily meal plan on the screen. So the focus is carbohydrates for energy with moderate protein and lower fat. This metabolic type feels best when consuming more carbs and struggles with high fat meals. And number 3, the mixed type diet, which is a balance of protein, carbs, and fats. I'll share a daily meal plan on the screen. So the focus is on supporting a steady energy supply throughout the day. So this type does well on a varied diet with all macronutrients in moderation. So these diets are based on the premise that individuals of each metabolic type respond best to specific macronutrient ratios. So if you've taken an online metabolic type test that doesn't follow the metabolic typing diet, here's a quick summary of the other popular metabolic type classification systems. The metabolic types A, B, and C. So the metabolic types A, B, and C relate to oxidation rates. Next up is metabolic types. So the slow 1 to 4 and the fast 1 to 4 focuses on categorizing metabolic type based on metabolism speed. Next up is metabolic types 1 to 5. So this metabolic types classification system offers 5 categories based on metabolic rate and macronutrient needs. All right, now let's talk about the metabolic types Zeta and Delta. So Zeta and Delta are less common metabolic type classifications. So are male and female metabolic types different? So while metabolic typing systems generally apply to both males and females, some theories suggest that there may be slight differences in how men and women process nutrients due to hormonal and physiological differences such as varying metabolic rates, fat distribution, and carbohydrate tolerance. However, most metabolic typing systems do not strictly categorize metabolic types based on gender. Is metabolic type a real thing? So metabolic typing, while popular in some nutrition circles, lacks strong scientific backing. So research on individual metabolic types such as protein, carbohydrate, or mixed is limited, and there's no conclusive evidence to support the idea that tailoring a diet strictly to a metabolic type leads to better outcomes. However, based on practical application, I definitely believe most people are a mixed type, but there are certain people who respond better to higher amounts of specific macronutrients. So for example, Jess is more of a carbohydrate friendly and I'm more fat friendly. And when it comes to protein, most people, especially if you're training, should be eating at least 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So while factors like genetics, age, and activity level do influence metabolism, a one-size-fits-all approach to dieting based on metabolic type hasn't been proven. Ultimately, if you think your body does better on high carbohydrates or high fat, in reality, you may do better with an even macro split. And if you haven't gotten your diet to a place where it works for you and you're seeing the results you want, you have to test different macronutrient splits on yourself. So set yourself up with a meal plan that is either high in protein, fat, or carbohydrates, or follow balanced macros and then follow it. However, don't just try it for a day and then say it doesn't work. One day is not enough to know if it's right for your body or not. You need to take at least 2-week trial before you can decide what your body responds well to. So take before photos, then after 2 weeks of trying the diet, take your after photos, and then you can decide how you felt and if it helped you lose fat or build muscle. This is how we know what has worked for us and what has worked for our clients. We don't promote just one type of diet because we know that different things work for different people. So the bottom line is, I recommend every one of you go out and figure out what works for you. Question of the day. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever taken a free online metabolic typing test? And if so, what was your metabolic type? And if you found this post helpful, click the like button below and subscribe to our Liveling TV YouTube channel for more health and fitness tips. So now I want you to go check out this post right here where I show you how to calculate how many calories you should eat in a day. Thanks for watching and keep living lean.